Here's a GM articulated bus that I just made and did a review on the previous video. You can Google that video. But guess what? It was not only this bus that they had for paper. Check this out. Here's another GM articulated bus. This is my paper GM Hamilton Street Railway articulated bus. These buses are actually one of my favorite articulated buses. Just the look and the design is pretty cool looking. Especially the windows and how fancy it is. But we're going to talk about that later. So, this is a bus that they had. These buses, just like the TDC, were their very first articulated buses. Each of these transit systems, like these transportations. They were, however, kind of like an experimental vehicle, test vehicles. I don't know if they were always test vehicles. I think they probably tested out. These were, like, TDC used these more as test vehicles than just passengers, although you were able to go on these, on passenger. But, these guys was pretty cool because they actually sold their 12 to Mississauga Transit. And I think it was because TDC was maybe the first one before they had Mississauga Transit, so they wanted to give one away to Mississauga. And that's pretty cool to say, actually. So that's pretty nice, TDC. But sadly, they retired these buses. Except for this one. Why? Because this was actually... Well, these buses did retire, all of them. But some of them were scrapped, others were just preserved buses, which meant that they kept it from an owner. Like, for an example, this one was kept from the Seashore Trolley Museum, which is located in the United States of America, or in the USA. Although, it was only Canada that had these buses, except for the United States. Although, I don't get how they were able to buy these buses, because I think, well... If I'm not I think we all know this, but GM and other, sometimes companies, they have their plants not always, like, let's say in the United States. There's also a plant in Canada. Like, let's say GM, like General Motors had their vehicle plants somewhere around Canada. I don't know where, but the government bought these buses. And it's usually the government, it's not just the transit that buys these buses. It's also the government that also helps them pay these buses, because usually, especially the buses from the USA, are very expensive. So they want to afford to get a bus that is cheaper and not, like, expensive, because if you buy stuff from the USA, they're very expensive. They're a lot more expensive than Canada. And this is why if you go to Canada, you'll see lots of Orion buses, like, let's say in New York, because those buses were made in Canada. So when you buy stuff from Canada, it's actually a lot cheaper, especially when you buy it from your own country. The government actually does more help in the USA, because since the USA is so expensive, they gotta, pay for these buses. But we're not gonna talk about that because it's not part of this. But yeah, there's actually 3 versions of these Hamilton buses in real life. One is painted exactly like this. One is actually similar to this, except it has some, some of them had different doors, some of them had this blackness here, and there was also one that looked like a school bus, but it was not a school bus, trust me, it was not even a school bus. Maybe if you were around in those 80s or in those very early years, you may have had seen what these colors of these buses look like. And I found a difference here. Check this out. There's 2 differences I want to show you. First off, what? Where's the window of this? Well, this one does not have a window, although some of these buses did have these windows maybe, but it was not, I would say, this one doesn't have that window thing, but the TDC does have it. And if you notice, this one has like 4 pieces of the door to assemble, while this one is just a 2-door. And it's the same thing with this rear part here, the rear trailer of it. and the back is also different. Although I would imagine the shape of it is exactly the same. It's just it's slightly different. This one has like modern rear lights, and it also has a spare red light there. I believe that's a brake light because when they brake, that thing would flash. And I actually, just like the other one, I drawed the lights there because they didn't came with the red lights, so they are supposed to have lights on top. It was a pretty nice looking bus, I tell you. Um, also notice that on this one, I did not drew an exhaust stack. They did came with an exhaust stack piece, but I was too lazy to make it there. Plus, it was so tiny, you won't be able to make that thing. But this one is a lot easier to see because since it's white, I drew it on there. And in real life, with these buses, all of these buses, no matter what color they are, they would have this exhaust stack there. They both have yield bus logo signs. This one has it on the window and it's kind of modern looking. But this one is slightly older and it's not on the window, but rather on the striping of the TDC logo. This is actually based on the CLRV streetcar livery, although it looks the same, I guess. It looks the same. I'm not sure. Just like no, the only difference is that they did not get an Orion Icarus. Instead, they got I believe it was a New Flyer articulated bus. I think it was an Excelsior articulated bus. I have no idea what it is. But they also had two New Flyer articulated buses after these buses. Um, but yeah, these were buses that they never went in service all around the not just the country but also North America, like let's say in the United States. The USA never had these buses. Although they do have a bus similar to this, but it's a Nova articulated bus, but it's clearly not the exact same bus. It actually has like the same windows as a normal classic bus, but this is the actual articulated buses that we're talking about, not the Nova. The Nova is not like the actual bus. Although transits like Halifax Transit in Canada, they had these buses, but it wasn't this particular one. It was the Nova one. But yeah. Oh yeah, sorry if it's shorter there. I accidentally made this rear part a lot bigger, so I didn't even knew that. At first, I just thought it was like the same size, but then I realized I may have had made it too big. But, anyways, you won't tell much about it anyways. Just like the other one, no cameras, no nothing on the bus, because back in those days, there were not that much technology. But they do have the ventilation shafts, which are, I believe, those emergency doors. So if they tip over, they can get out or something. The sides of it look pretty much the same, although there's some... Well, it's obviously the colors that are different and some of the details, but the windows look pretty much the same, I believe. Especially this rear one here. They both have that indent there. And how do I know this is a Hamilton? It just says it right there. And it's not just this part of the bus that says it. It also says it here. It's also 1982. These were 1982 buses. And yeah, I also did some other details. It was also this rear light there. That's the only kind of detail I was able to do. It was pretty easy. These bellows were pretty difficult to do, so if you're new to like folding, I recommend just printing out, no, not printing out, but I recommend just taking your regular sheet of paper and just make a paper fan. You don't have to print it out first. You just gotta make a fan first, and then you can think about bending it, and if you got the technique right, you may be able to fold these bellows, and then you can have your articulated buses. And if you love more of these buses, you can do anything you want with these buses, really. You can make more of them, you can have a fleet of them. But yeah, it's pretty sad that these buses retired, although I'm happy that one of them has been kept to a museum. That's all that matters. Oh, I forgot. They also bend too, just like the real thing. The only difference I did, though, was that when you print these buses out, they actually come with this weird section piece. It's like this like the pivoting joint. I decided to cut it off on these buses, but I did made other buses the same thing with the pivoting joint, and I'll show you that, but I'm gonna have to do it in a separate video. And no, this is not only these variations of buses I did. I actually had to print out 3 of these Hamilton Street Railway buses. One, I had to leave it like this, so I only have 2 buses that are like the regular ones. But here are my 2 customs I'm gonna show you. But I'm gonna do these in a different video though, because this takes up some space. Here is my custom articulated bus. This time it's a Mississauga. This is actually the Mississauga they took in California. I think it was the regional transit. I have no idea what it was. This is the 540-34 Mississauga bus. Kind of a familiar one. And they both always have that window there, it's like a 3D window. I tried my best to do it as best as I can, but again, these were kind of a small model. So I printed these out on paper. And here's my OC Transpo one, which is the Ottawa Transit. I don't really know what OC stands for. Let me know in the comments if you're from Canada or somebody that knows about these transits, what OC stands for. Not the Transpo, but OC. It either stands for Ottawa Commission or maybe Ottawa City Transit. I have no idea. Let me know in the comments what it stands for. I think it stands for Ottawa Commission. And if you notice, I also customized the base, so instead of just saying Hamilton, I blacked it out with a permanent marker, and I just write OC Transpo. It's not gonna look that good because it's from a marker, so it's kind of difficult to see. But the only difference I did, though, is that, if you notice, this time I left the pivoting joints, because I never knew better about these pivoting joints, because I was so bad at making, sometimes, these pieces. But this time I found out that I could have just simply do this. Now, you could actually use anything that is like a pin. You can even use a screw. This is like a metal screw. It doesn't matter what screw you use, but you want to make sure it's just small enough and like wide enough for it to fit through these holes, and then you can make your own pivoting joint, and you can see it actually works. I'm gonna do a video on these buses, so don't worry if I don't do a video on these. I like this one more because it's all red, and my favorite color is red. I like this one also. These are the 2 buses I had dreamed about, because they should have made these buses, and just like the other one, they both have an exhaust stack. Now this time, instead of just drawing a red lights, these were actually made from a marker. I just simply do like that. This time I use a black one because you know, red matches with red, so I want it to be a different color. But in real life, these would kind of look the same, and you won't even tell. It's kind of difficult, so I had to draw lights in like that. They both have that bellow part, except this time I made it into an actual kind of bendable bus. They do indeed have those pivoting joints. It's just that you can see on this one does not have a pivoting joint, but this one does have a pivoting joint. And I also found out it's not gonna flex downwards that much how this one does, because that pivoting joint is locked on solid. It only bends perfectly upwards, but it's gonna be difficult, and I don't want to break it because you can easily bend this and then you can cause a problem. I always tape the parts that need to be cut out before I even punch it through there. Yeah, this is just a screw I used, and you can see it becomes like when you attach it there like that, you can make it into a pivoting joint. You could also, now some people like to use this when they make these articulated buses. They're like these weird clock pins. They kind of look sort of brass-like color. I think they're like zinc or gold. I don't know what they are. But they're like these flat-looking bendable pins, these metal pins. You could actually, if you want, get one of those and just simply slap it on there, and then you have another pivoting joint. But I use a screw because I don't have those pins. So I thought the screw did a pretty good job, and it actually did. it actually does what a real toy, like, imagine if they had a toy version of this, it probably would have a pivoting joint and it actually works. So this actually bends as good as a toy articulated bus, because usually with toy buses they do, like, if it's a bendable bus, they would also have that pivoting joint. I'm not gonna show you because I don't know where my articulated buses are, but I kind of turned these buses into like an actual toy. They did actually had models of these buses. A bus like this and a bus like this, like a Mississauga and an OC Transpo. Except this one, it had a silver plating there, but this one is just all white because I didn't had any marker that was silver, like chrome marker, to make it look like a normal bus, because usually buses they have the silver part. But yeah, and I also did the same thing. I also try to make it look interesting. Like I turn it, like, let's say it says Mississauga Transit. Also says Mississauga. Oh, geez, sorry if I showed you this. I will do eventually videos on these buses, but yeah. And oh yeah, and I forgot. These buses. If you notice, the sides and the back are based on an older bus, but the front of it looks newer. Why? Because the front is actually based on a GM Classic. And I recommend saying a GM Classic than MCI, because usually when you look at these buses in real life, you'll see a GM embossed logo there, a GM logo embossed on the bus. If you see that logo, I would imagine that's actually based on a normal GM Classic, but they just took the front off only, and then they attached it to there. It's like if the GM Fishbowl and the GM Classic were the exact same height, and almost like the similar size. But if you notice on the Fishbowl, it's slightly taller. But somehow they were able to fit a fishbowl-like body to a GM Classic front. And how do I know? It's not just the windows, although some of the windows may have been edited and had some variations of window size. It's also the back that is also based on a fishbowl. And here's another one. Here's a Mississauga. This was also donated or sent by another kind of transportation, but sadly this one retired. They also kept the OC Transpo, I forgot to say. But they're not gonna, they use this as a preserved bus, which means that they don't drive it, unless if they think that it's okay to. Because usually, these buses were like somewhere around in 1979 or in 1980. It says it was made in 1982, so maybe right now it may not work as good, because this is 2020, so from 1982 to 2020, it may actually break down though. Yeah, I think people that don't drive these things are doing the right thing, because they may easily break down. But yeah. Oh, by the way, I forgot. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit a like below and please subscribe, and I'll do a review on these two buses, so don't worry if you didn't see those, but I'm gonna do a review on those two buses, but I'm gonna do those separately, so it's not like I'm gonna do them in a group. I just gotta review one at a time. That's it. See ya. I like the front of that bus, though. And I pretty much like these buses. This is one of my favorite buses. Oh, I forgot. I just said see ya. Yep. That's it. See ya.